the Institute of Directors Leadership Lecture Series. I was interested in the talkback that was affecting your introduction principle, and I just took part earlier on today in a conference call with all Highlands Islands enterprise staff in all locations around the Highlands and Islands. It was a unique exercise. It involved no speak back by any of the localities. It was a monologue from Inverness by me to the staff around the country. So maybe that should be the motto for the Leadership Lecture Series as we proceed. Leadership is never far away from the top of any news agenda, whether that is leadership in politics, leadership in business, leadership in culture, leadership in our country, leadership in our society. Leadership is always under scrutiny and always of significance as a factor in determining the success or otherwise of different organisations and different processes. As you've said, Principal, there was a change of leadership in the government in the last few months, and that a change of leadership involved me being involved in what is affectionately called a reshuffle in political speak. When a reshuffle, not many of you will have been involved in a reshuffle, but I can tell you it does involve a certain amount of unnerving anxiety about what on earth is going to happen to you. For me, it involved getting a call from the First Minister's private office to be told, you are to arrive first for the reshuffle, which is not always a good sign. My mood was slightly cheered by the second piece of news, which was, you're to arrive by the front door, which is generally good news unless you're in for full-scale humiliation as you leave government. But as events transpired, it was very much good news for me, and it's an enormous privilege for me to hold office now as the Deputy First Minister of Scotland and to have the opportunity to support our new First Minister in taking forward the agenda that she is determined to take forward in Scotland. As I reflect on that change of leadership, I want to reflect for a moment on the leadership that came to a conclusion in November, the leadership of Alex Salmond, who was the First Minister of Scotland, the longest-serving First Minister of Scotland for over 7 years. And I would be the first to acknowledge that the First Minister, or the former First Minister, is not without his critics, if I can put it as gently as that. But whatever anybody says about Alex Salmond, a number of things are absolutely crystal clear for me as somebody who worked very closely with him in a leadership role for the best part of 25 years. You always knew very clearly and spelt out very directly the views, aspirations, hopes and direction that Alex Salmond wanted to take in terms of his leadership. You always knew what he was heading for and what he was trying to achieve. There was no lack of clarity about all of that. And I think what was also crucial for me about particularly the period of his leadership as First Minister is that he made it his business in everything that he did to ensure that Scotland's profile and Scotland's interests were well promoted and well understood by a much wider audience. And the purpose of what he was trying to do and what he was trying to achieve was very clearly expressed to a wider audience. So as we reflect on the essential characteristics of leadership, I, for one, feel that I benefited from a very close quarters view of the contribution and style of leadership that Alex Salmond delivered to Scotland. And I think Scotland benefited from the leadership that Alex Salmond delivered because it was of such clarity of purpose, whether you agreed with it or not. The leadership quality was of such a clear format and a clear nature that it was of benefit to the whole of the country. And as a consequence of all of that, I think Scotland has been made a stronger and a more successful country as a consequence of that delivery of clear and decisive leadership. And I'll come on to say some more later on about the implications of that incredible period in the life of Scotland, and particularly the effect of 2014, which I think will go down in history as one of the most significant years in the development of Scotland as a country. Leadership, of course, is not just about political leadership. Leadership percolates the whole of our society. And I want to talk, just to begin with, about two examples of leadership that I've experienced today, which I think illustrate the nature of how leadership can be deployed and different styles and different approach to leadership that I've encountered today. The first of those examples was on a visit I was paying to the Central Primary School in Inverness, the oldest primary school in Inverness, right in the heart of the city. A part of the city that is not without its social and economic challenges, and a primary school that captures children from a wide variety of different backgrounds, different nationalities, different experiences of their childhood. And what I saw there was leadership of the school which translated the agenda of the government's approach to a whole variety of different areas of public service activity, translated in a wonderful way, a wonderfully empathetic way to the interests and the aspirations and the opportunities of our youngest citizens within our society. The government, in its policy agenda, focuses essentially on the need to pursue a preventative agenda in intervening in the delivery of best outcomes for citizens in our country. Translated into plain speak, it means that we should intervene early when we can see a problem emerging to try to avoid bad outcomes festering and becoming ever more deep in the years to come. And all of the research and this is supported by an enormous evidence process, which says that if you fail to intervene in the early years of a child's life, where there may be problems with that child, whether they are behavioural problems, whether they are health problems, whether they are experience problems in the background of the child in family or in wider community life, if you fail to intervene at that stage, then the state will end up paying a very, very much more expensive price in the years to come. Put crudely, if you fail to intervene to create a better outcome for a child in their earliest years, the chances of that child becoming a persistent offender and the likelihood of that child requiring in later life incarceration will be ever more greater as a consequence. For every pound invested in a child's early years, we will find a £10 reward or a £10 saving to the public purse in the years to come. And forgive me for being the Finance Minister who looks at all of these questions with a very hard and sharp nose. But what I saw at Central School in Inverness today was that rather hard-nosed financial analysis communicated to the children through the use of one word, which the head teacher used to me as he took me round parts of the school that are supporting some of the most troubled youngsters in our society who've, children of 5, 6, 7, 8 years of age who've had a troubled background and who are presenting as troubled children at this stage. The way he has designed the facilities of that school, the way he has designed the facilities through deploying leadership in that school to transform the school, and the manner in which he delivered his strategy was with the use of one word: love. That these children, these troubled children, had to come into his school, and whatever they felt about their experience in that school, they had to go out of that school feeling as if they were loved by the experience of being in that school. And I thought, as an example of leadership, and you could feel as you walked into the school, the impressive nature of what was being achieved. And you can see it in the results of that school in terms of the transformation of life chances of some troubled youngsters in our society. You could see the effect of that approach that was being taken, of the translation of the strategic rationale of government policy into a practical setting in that school. And why was it happening in that way? It was happening in that way because of clear and decisive leadership from that head teacher in the school. And yes, of course, backed up by the resources and the support of the Education Authority, but crucially, the head teacher deploying the leadership and the approach which was able to create much better outcomes for our young people in our society. So as I think about the challenges and the questions of leadership, as I think about the way in which the government sets out its agenda on many of these questions, and I'll come on to talk about some of that leadership agenda in a moment, it is essential that the necessity of leadership is embraced by every single individual in our society, that leadership can be deployed in any manner of ways in our society. The second example of leadership that I saw today was at my first engagement in Inverness, which was a meeting of the Inverness Campus Forum, which is the grouping of public bodies that I chair on a 6-monthly basis to bring together a variety of partners, Highlands Enterprise, the University of the Highlands and Islands, NHS Highland, the Inverness College, Sports Scotland, the Centre for Health Sciences, the Scottish Rural College, and a variety of other players to create a new resource for the Highlands and Islands of the Beechwood campus to the east of the A9, just at the intersection with the A96. Now, when I got involved in this project as a concept in 2007, to be absolutely blunt, I looked at the plans and I thought to myself, well, this has taken some imagination to get to this level. You know, this will take some going to make this happen. Well, it's happening, and it'll open in May, and the students will be into Inverness College in August. And around about the Inverness College building are now popping up a whole variety of other buildings, and the project is attracting inward investment success already, and it's not finished completion, and a huge new part of the economic infrastructure, not just of the city of Inverness, but of the Highlands and Islands, has been created. And we are shortly going to have an enormous economic asset that will underpin so much of the aspirations of the University of the Highlands and Islands, which the Principal and Vice-Chancellor was expressing today at that discussion, is about adding value to the excellent work that goes on in each of the individual component colleges, of which Moray College is one integral part in that process. And I asked myself the question, how on earth has this project, about which I certainly had question marks in my mind as to whether it would ever get off the ground back in 2007, how has it come about? It has come about because of clear, decisive and emphatic leadership that's been given to the project by a combination, but by essentially the combined public sector partners that have been involved in that project, principally Highlands Enterprise, the University of the Highlands and Islands, Inverness College and NHS Highland. And what it will do is it will be able to act as a magnet for further investment, for further economic activity, for further economic opportunities to be pursued here in the Highlands and Islands of a character that it has not been possible to date previously to pursue. And that's an enormous economic strength for this part of Scotland. And I think crucially, and the Principal made reference to this in his introduction to me this evening and his explanation of the role of Moray College has led the way in so much of this activity in digital healthcare as a component to the narrative that can now be expressed about what is on offer for inward investment support in the Highlands and Islands as a consequence of the concentration and collaboration of activity around healthcare and life sciences that has been made possible as a consequence of the leadership and investment that's been made in this project. So these two examples strike me today of routine examples within our community of great achievement which are only possible because of the exercise of clear and direct leadership to make good things happen. And in my experience as a minister has been formed sharply by the necessity, and this is my first observation on the question of leadership, is that leadership has to have a clarity about it for it to be successful. One of my criticisms of the government that we succeeded was that I was never terribly clear about what the purpose of the previous government was. And one of the things I was determined to do when we came into office in 2007 was to make it absolutely crystal clear that the government would have at its heart a clear sense of direction, and that clear sense of direction has been consistent since 2007, which is that our purpose as a government is to create opportunities for all to flourish in Scotland through increasing sustainable economic growth. That gives a focus, a direction, a grip to all of the activities of government. But more importantly, it also gives a focus to a whole variety of different organisations around the country who can look at government and who can say, well, if we want to make a more emphatic impact on our wider community, on our area of activity, if we want to achieve a great deal more, then we can perhaps reinforce that clear sense of direction that comes from government as a consequence. And that is an important aspect of how we go about our business as an administration, of making sure there is a clarity of direction that other organisations can follow, and we can encourage and motivate complementary action to make sure that we are using scarce public resources in a compatible and effective way as a consequence of our mutual and respective activities. Now, of course, the exercise of leadership for government is for me, as I've said, a central point in how we go about our business, because it makes it imperative that we have an agenda that can be widely understood, and that for us is demonstrated most directly by the choices we make around our policy programme and how they are reinforced by the way in which we deploy the resources that are available to us as a government, and through the annual budget process. And the government's direction in the programme for government that was set out by our new First Minister in November is anchored around three principal themes of creating a stronger economy for Scotland, around tackling inequality within our society, and in ensuring that we protect and reform the public services of Scotland and involve people and communities much more effectively in designing and delivering those public services within our community. And in each of these themes, the government has set out to take forward a number of elements of our activity which are designed to ensure that we properly motivate processes of improvement across the country that have much better outcomes as a consequence. And let me just go through a few examples of exactly that. Under the theme of creating a stronger and a more sustainable economy, one of the policy ideas where the government is exercising leadership is about setting out the invitation to our business community to work with the government in taking forward what we've called a business pledge, a Scottish business pledge. What's this? How I would summarise this is essentially about trying to say to the business community in Scotland, the diffuse business community in Scotland, that there are ways in which individual companies in Scotland can work collaboratively with the government to ensure that we follow a similar direction that can deliver good outcomes for our society. So, for example, in exchange for the government and its agencies, HIE and Scottish Enterprise, providing support to companies, we look to companies to work with us in strengthening the employment base of Scotland through measures such as paying staff the living wage, to use that as a tool to improve productivity within the workplace, about working together to make progress on internationalising business activity, to broaden the business base of our country, and to reinforce some of the work that I just saw when I was in Forres on my way through to Elgin tonight, which the Glasgow School of Art are involved in with Highlands Enterprise, of working to encourage and motivate greater levels of company-based innovation within the business base of Scotland, to give our companies greater opportunities to improve productivity, to improve markets, and to deliver financial benefits as a consequence. So out of that invitation to business to participate with government, we are exercising some leadership to say to the wider economy and to our wider society, there are joint objectives that we can achieve as a consequence of our collaboration. On the theme of tackling inequality, we look to the business community to work with us through measures such as the living wage, as I've just referred to improve the quality of employment in our society and to see the returns of that improvement shared between individuals and also by companies in Scotland. At our National Economic Forum back in December, we hosted a discussion involving a number of employers who had, over the last 10 years, committed to pay the living wage to their employees. And what was fascinating for many individuals involved in that discussion was the way in which companies marshalled the benefits and the experience that they had felt from improving the quality of employment and the quality of remuneration that they shared with their members of staff in the overall well-being and strength of the company. And that example of ensuring that we are able to share the benefits of our wider economic activity between employees and companies is an example again of how we can exercise the power and the effectiveness of leadership to try to create a better climate in which working practices can thrive in Scotland. And one of the points of thinking that the First Minister was anxious to bring to bear to the reshuffle of the Cabinet in November was the creation of a Fair Work portfolio that's now led by my colleague Rosanna Cunningham, the purpose of which will be to lead a national process of improving the quality and the effectiveness of our workforce in Scotland, to improve the quality of life of individuals who are employed in Scotland, but as importantly, to improve the value of employment in Scotland and to improve the productivity and the sustainability of the company base of Scotland. So, through the exercise of our policy leadership, there are a number of ways in which we can affect the agenda within Scotland. I think there are a number of other areas of leadership example that I think are important to reflect on, which are of a slightly different character. Over the course of the last few weeks, we've seen a number of really very serious incidents affecting our society. And one of my responsibilities now as Deputy First Minister is to oversee the resilience operations of the government. And these have been tested very strongly in the course of the last few weeks by the tragic incidents in Glasgow and also by the necessity to handle with great care the first case of Ebola being discovered within the United Kingdom. And what has struck me in both of these very trying incidents is that the effectiveness of all of the activity is a combination of excellent leadership, of the response that is undertaken by our emergency services, and the way in which that is put into practice by people who are deploying and delivering that service and that intervention directly with individuals in our society. And as a microcosm of the type of climate that we need to be able to operate within as a society, of having clear, well understood approaches to leadership and how that can be deployed very directly within our society. The emergency instances that we've had to act to deal with were, to me, illustrated very strongly by the way in which individuals responded in a very testing climate to the requirements of action in that particular way. So leadership needs to be direct and emphatic at a local level. But there are also other examples of leadership where we have to exercise, that's an example where leadership needs to be direct and needs to be delivered on the ground. There are other examples of leadership where we need to set a tone and then leave it to others to take the initiative and to take the action. And one of them where I feel that's most important is in relation to the way in which we have tried as a government to open up an awful lot more freedom and opportunity for people to innovate and to be creative and to be entrepreneurial within our society. We launched very recently a framework called the Can-Do framework, a framework for entrepreneurship, where essentially the government set out the challenge The government set out the ambition. The government set out the framework. The government said there will be some resources available to take forward this agenda, but then invited others to deploy the leadership and to design the solutions to all of that. And if I look back on the different decisions that I've taken as a minister over the last 7 years, the decision that I took to create that type of space, exercise the leadership to create that space to allow others to fill it with their ideas and their creativity, was, in my view, one of the best decisions that I took. We didn't prescribe from St Andrew's House, this is the way you will do it. We created the framework and then left to others to exercise the innovation and the creativity to take that agenda forward. What's that left us with? Well, it's left us with organisations like Entrepreneurial Spark, who are now creating and driving a whole process of innovation and creativity in the new business development sector within Scotland, with a level of innovation and creativity that I've never seen in my lifetime in Scotland. It's left us with the Scottish Edge Fund, which is now attracting expressions of interest from new start businesses, the length and breadth of Scotland, to compete for crucial sums of money, which, in the world of public finances are very small sums of money, 10, 15, 20,000 pounds. But for small new start businesses can be the transformational sums of money that can lead to great products and developments emerging. Leaving that space to encourage that creative activity to emerge, it can also be a product of leadership into the bargain to ensure that new ideas and new ventures can thrive and develop as a consequence of the way in which we exercise leadership, exercise our decision-making power, but leave plenty of scope for others to exercise leadership into the bargain. And I suppose that brings me neatly to my very last point, which is another. A lot of what I've talked about tonight has been about clarity, about focus of direction, about making it clear to people where you stand and what you should do and what you should achieve. But there is also a necessity for leadership to encourage participation, engagement, and to solicit agreement into the bargain. And it's one of the things that's been a profound effect that's been left on me as a consequence of the process of the referendum, because what the referendum did, whatever the outcome, which was not to my approval, but what the referendum did was it activated and encouraged our population to participate, to engage, to seek agreement around certain propositions and certain ideas. And one of the things that I'm determined to do as a minister in the way in which we exercise leadership is that we exercise leadership in a way that is working to secure participation, is working to encourage engagement, is working to seek agreement, that we are sufficiently open, that we are not sufficient, that we're not exclusively prescriptive, that we leave the space for us to engage in a dialogue with our wider society as to how, through our combined resources and our combined imagination, we can create the best outcomes for individuals in our society. Because one of my strongest observations as a minister after 7.5 years in office is that the best results are generated by how we encourage collaboration between different players within our society. I've seen it in the work that I've seen in the very close observation that I've seen of the University of the Highlands and Islands through the work on the Inverness campus. I've seen it through a variety of other ventures where we've encouraged local authorities and health services and enterprise companies and the police authority to come together to work on joint projects and joint outcomes to improve the outcomes that are achieved for individuals in our society. We have to leave enough space and create enough space for the exercise of leadership to be undertaken in an imaginative way at local level, but to set out a framework which is clear and emphatic within which individuals can operate throughout our country. I think the 2014 has been a quite remarkable year for Scotland. It has been a year in which the country has never been off the news agenda. We've been in front of television screens the length and breadth of the country. It's been a most decisive period in our country's history. But what it's given us, I think, is a thoroughly engaged society, a thoroughly engaged country, a very assertive country, and it's one that, as we exercise leadership, we have to exercise leadership in a fashion that embraces that energy, that enthusiasm and that dynamism, and uses it to positive outcomes, to create positive outcomes within our society today. I've seen a number of those very positive outcomes today, and I look forward to discussing them with you this evening. Thank you very much.
Roving mics. So if somebody would like to kick us off with a question, and we'll give her a question from Mr. Swinney and someone else, please be the first. Do not rush. Mr. Simcoe, am I right?
I'm Neil Simcoe. I'm Dean of Arts, Humanities and Business at the University of Highlands and Islands. So good to see you, and thank you very much for your talk this evening. I just wanted to pick up with the theme that you talked about, or you touched on, I think, several times in your talk, which is about collaborative leadership and the place of collaboration in leadership. This is something that, of course, within the University of the Highlands and Islands is key to us. We're collaborating across the whole of the region to deliver the university. But I think the specific context of my question is the partnership that we're developing with Glasgow School of Art in Forres, and how, together with them, our work in creative industries, we have the Moray School of Art here. We're about to go to advertisement for a chair in creative industries based in Shetland College, UHI. The observation is that working together in this example with Glasgow School of Art and with the University of Highlands and Islands, we can together make a significant difference to creative industries in the Highlands and Islands. Another example, I suppose, of collaboration, you cited Beechwood. We also have the general concept of the University of the Highlands and Islands. But I'd just be interested in your observations about what I've just said, and in particular this notion of collaborative leadership and how important it is to you.
Well, one of my observations about the Glasgow School of Art collaboration at Forres, which I've just visited on my way here, was that I was stunned by the way in which, I'm stunned by what the Glasgow School of Art does in general. I've seen it in a number of different processes. And one of the things that, when I first saw the School of Art involved in a process design exercise with a manufacturing company, I was struck by one of the things that's troubled me about the whole debate and discussion about innovation, which I thought the School of Art confronted beautifully in this example that I saw with a manufacturing company, is that the price of the School of Art leading this innovation process with the manufacturing company was that the grouping of employees that had to be involved in the process had to be a slice of the company, from the boardroom to the shop floor, and they weren't prepared to do it unless that was the case. And what it said to me is that it confronted a worry I have about innovation, that innovation is viewed as being the preserve of people in ivory towers who involve sophisticated technology, whereas innovation is for absolutely everybody. And unless everybody in an organisation is thinking, how do I do things better? How can I improve this? How can I make this more successful? It's, we're missing out on the fruits and the gains that can be achieved as a consequence of that process. So I think the School of Art collaboration is an example of how resources external to the Highlands can be used to strengthen the proposition that's available here. And the UHI concept is a splendid example of how value can be added as a consequence of the collaboration that comes from different organisations and different strengths in different parts of the locality. And I think, crucially, so that collaborative leadership is vital, and it's got us so far on the Beechwood campus in a relatively short space in time. And I think we now need to see that being driven ever further forward, and looking at the updates on the UHI about how that is taking its course, it's becoming ever more encouraging about how that the nature of that collaborative leadership is now having a beneficial effect. One of my other observations on life as a minister, or certainly from my standpoint, is that virtually nothing, no issue that I confront or see us having to confront as a society is ever confronted in one neat little compartment. It needs collaboration. It needs various players to be putting their shoulder to the wheel. So the encouragement of collaboration through all aspects of the policy agenda is very important. In public service delivery, the government's emphasis on community planning, cooperation and collaboration between key public service agencies is the foundation of effective public service delivery and effective public service reform. So it's crucial that at all times we have that collaborative approach at the heart of policy making. And I think, over time, the UHI will become, it will become an absolutely fascinating international example of how you can design a totally innovative institution in this form. It will literally be world leading, and you can see that as I've watched it over the last few years. You can just see that beginning to emerge, and I have to say it's now taking a much sharper form and a much more emphatic character, which is welcome to see.
Hi, I'm Giles Hubie. I hope you can hear me okay, because I'm currently losing my voice at the moment. I run a small company called Copernicus Technology, and we make test sets for the aerospace industry. And we're quite a small business, so one of my challenges as leading that business is there are some times that you know what needs to be done and how it has to be done, and by when it has to be done, and you just want to say to people, just do this, like this, by then. But there are times, like you said, you need to step back and let them have a go. Let's see how they get on, and that's a challenge as a business. So I'm interested in your personal view from a leadership perspective. How do you personally determine when are you going to roll your sleeves up and get stuck in, and when are you going to take a step back and let people get on with it? So, for example, there's the problem with the oil industry and the oil price at the moment. To what extent, how do you determine, you personally from a leadership point of view, to what extent do you get stuck in with your sleeves rolled up, and to what extent do you step back and let people get on with it?
I think it depends. Well, let me give you an example. I used one example in my speech about a time where I've thought the best thing we can do is actually leave some space for others to create, which is my point about the innovation and entrepreneurship framework, where we set the framework, but we didn't say it's going to be done this way and it's going to be done that way. We said, this is the framework, this is what we're interested in, let things emerge and let's see where it goes. And out of that, what have bubbled up have been a whole host of fabulous ideas and interventions, and Scotland's benefited as a consequence. So I suppose what my test of this is, you can afford to do that where you don't have a crisis on your hands in the world that I occupy. If you don't have a crisis in your hands, you can probably leave that space for things to emerge. If you've got a crisis in your hands, you roll your sleeves up. And you roll your sleeves up before you've got a crisis in your hands, because you should be seeing where crises are coming from. So emergency situations, for example, we are right in there. And it's got to be done this way, it's got to be done that way, and it's got to be done the next way. And that's what people are looking for. They're looking for clear and emphatic leadership. And in industrial and economic difficulties, that's exactly the approach that we take. Where we can take additional action. For example, in the oil industry, the key issue that needs to be addressed just now is the fiscal regime. That's the problem. That's the revenue base is declining because of the oil price, and that is affecting the investment climate. So the only other thing that can give in that process, if you want the investment climate to thrive, is the tax take, and that's the element which we are saying to the UK government, look, the decisions you have to take in the budget in March are crucial. There's a variety of other interventions we can take around about skills development, around the support for innovation, which all elements of which we are making available to the industry just now. But that short-term challenge that the industry faces will not be solved by the availability of skills resources or innovation resources. What will make the difference in the short term will be actions on the fiscal regime. So you've got in the world that I occupy, if you don't have a problem staring you in the face, you can afford to leave some space for a bit of time and a bit of space to be used to create new approaches. But if you have a problem facing you, you have to act, and you have to act very clearly and decisively to address it. There's another important observation which I learnt from one of the industrial difficulties that I had to address of a company that collapsed. And when I was dealing with the situation, I had a conversation with one of the workforce when I was in the plant. And one of the workforce said to me, I was just talking about the difficulties they were experiencing. These were people who were about to lose their jobs, and I was discussing with one of them where he thought things had become difficult, and he made a very strong criticism of the fact that the workforce could never get the management to listen to the difficulties that they felt they had on the shop floor. And the guy said to me, if I'm standing around doing nothing for 36% of my time, is it any wonder we're losing our jobs today? And what that said to me is that there's an important part of exercising leadership isn't just always about saying to people, do this, do that. It might actually be about listening to people who've got a better sense and insight into some of the difficulties that will exist in a particular company, and to respond and to act accordingly once you've heard that experience.
Thank you. My name's Craig Lowther. As you may well know, Forres currently hosts the European Pipe Band Championships, and also the World Orienteering Championships are coming to Forres in August of 2015. With that in mind, how can we, or how are we, supporting grassroots and community leadership to develop and enhance the way that we are as a society?
Well, I would imagine that these... I'm not so familiar with the orienteering, but I suspect on the Pipe Band Championships, you've probably got that because Forres has taken the initiative to bid for that. Yes, exactly. I thought it would be. Well, point one is that the government's currently legislating for a community empowerment bill, and there's a bit of me that looks at a piece of legislation about community empowerment that we're legislating for. The government, Parliament decrees there shall be community empowerment. And I look at this and I think to myself, why are we legislating for this? Shouldn't we just be letting people get on with it? Now, the purpose of the Community Empowerment Bill is to remove some of the obstacles to community empowerment. So, if I give an example of that, one of the provisions within the bill is to make it easier for local communities to acquire redundant public sector assets, physical assets that are no longer used for public service purposes, but could be used for alternative community purposes if put into the community sector in the right fashion and invariably at the right price. But there's a manual that I preside over called the Scottish Public Finance Manual, which is written in a fashion which says to public servants, don't you dare sell a public asset to anybody unless you get full market value for it. Now, I've seen around the country some absolutely fabulous examples of communities that have taken over a public sector asset. They've transformed it from a redundant facility to a busy hub of energetic activity on all sorts of things. But they've managed to achieve that despite all the obstacles that we put in their way by saying this asset must be disposed of for market value, blah, blah, blah. So what the Community Empowerment Bill can do is to remove some of those technical obstacles from the route, from the path of individuals and communities from actually fulfilling their potential. But there's also an important signal that's involved in the Community Empowerment Bill, which is about saying that actually the state, the public sector, may not have all the answers to the aspirations and the hopes of individual communities. So, for example, what has been around the country, either in my own constituency, I can think of communities that are always on the front foot, looking for initiatives to take forward that will attract people into their locality, and the two that you've cited are two very good examples of how that has been achieved for forests. The thing that I think we can best do in those circumstances, well, there's two things I think we can do. One is to remove obstacles from your way, which is the community empowerment part of it. And then the second part of it is to reinforce some of what you're doing. So if I take a venture in my own constituency, the folk musician Dougie McLean, off his own bat, has a 2-week festival in the autumn called Perthshire Amber. It trades on the beauty and majesty of Perthshire in the autumn, the most beautiful part of the world. Any part of the world in autumn, in my humble opinion. Who needs to go to Washington or Boston to see the autumn gold when you can go to Perthshire? That was a modest plug. But Dougie set up this festival many years ago. I think this is his 10th year, actually. And out of nowhere, to celebrate just kind of music, Perthshire ambience, etc., etc., and Events Scotland now weighs in behind it. Doesn't run it, but reinforces it. It just gives it a bit of extra oomph that local organisers can't do. And I think that's the type of role and function that public sector organisations can provide to give a bit more oomph and effectiveness to what is excellent planning. And the fact that people are prepared to go out of their way, to go through all the hassle of bartering, negotiating, organising, all that will have to go on, no doubt to get a pipe band championship, some corrupt practices to try to make sure it's landed for forests, or something like that. That's an indication of a vibrant community, and we shouldn't try to stifle that or to try to run it. We should just try to reinforce it.
Ian Campbell. Alex Salmond's biographer, David Torrance, alleged that Mr. Salmond was magnificent in the broad sweep of strategy, but wasn't really a details man. I get the feeling that the new First Minister is very much a master of detail. In your view, how essential it is to be master of detail to be an effective leader?
Well, that's a fascinating question. Actually, I don't think the Torrance assessment is actually correct, because having been on the receiving end of interrogation on various subjects by the former First Minister, I can assure you, trying to get through the conversation believing that he had no command of the detail was a foolish strategy, an utterly foolish strategy, because it would stun me often at the command of detail. I was operating in my finance pigeonhole, and he's operating right across every area of government, and it would stun me at times, frequently, the command of detail that he had on particular subjects, and certainly on the interrogation of different subjects and topics I was involved in. There was no lack of detailed knowledge involved in that. So I think I wouldn't believe all the biographers' assessment of the man. I don't think you can exercise effective leadership if you have no command of the detail. I think there's a difference between interfering on all manner of the detail involved. You know, former First Minister operated on the basis that he appointed members to his cabinet who were people and he required to be competent and capable individuals to take their decisions and to be in command of things. And they would be challenged on the detail, and they'd be challenged by him because he would have that command of the detail. But I think if you leave people to get on with the job, to exercise the responsibility you've given to them, and have a sufficient command of sufficient detail to know when that may need to be challenged, that's the art form of leadership. If you try to kind of know absolutely everything, then you'll get sunk in the deep, and you'll just be sunk by the volume of it. But there is a way in which you can exercise sufficient scrutiny and challenge by having sufficient command of the detail that keeps people on their toes. And if you're standing up answering First Minister's questions on a weekly basis, and the first 3 questions you've got no idea what they're going to be, then you've really got to know your onions across everything, and you've got to know sufficient about your onions on every subject to be able to get through that experience on a weekly basis. And certainly it's having that knowledge across a wide variety of different topics, and I certainly see that now with the wider responsibilities that I have of having to go into territory that I've previously not been immersed in, to understand more and more about that, to enable you to take the type of decisions that you're required to take in a broader leadership role than when you're operating within a particular portfolio.
Well, thanks for that. I'd like to offer our sincere thanks to John for those wise words. Fascinating lecture. Some of the highlights I would pick out, are around leadership defining success, about this notion of absolute clarity, being concise so that people get the message. The collective collaborative leadership is interesting. That interests me as well. We're doing a lot of work with some of the partners in this room, and I can see collective collaborative leadership at work. Leadership in a crisis, hugely important, that need to act quick and be directive at that point, but also the longer, innovative, entrepreneurial leadership that we do need to develop. I'm interested to hear your comments from the school this morning and how they're developing what they call love. And it will be eventually a love of life, work, and doing the right things. Especially pleasing to hear the leadership experience you're building up around the Beechwood campus in Inverness, especially should another major estate project get funding within the UHI. Thanks to those of you who posed some interesting, challenging questions. They were good. And thanks for taking the time to come and spend it with John and us here, Moray College UHI. Again, I'd like to say thanks to the Highlands and Islands Enterprise for their continued support for these Institute of Directors Leadership Lectures series. And once again, could I ask that we finally show our appreciation to Mr. Swinney in the usual way. Thank you. Thanks.